Right, people, we're back. Victory and Vices podcast. Me, Rory Spooner, Reese Henley. No James Vec. He has scheduling conflicts, so he couldn't be with us this week. But as you can see, a very, very special guest, Mr. Steve Wraith. Now, Steve, we appreciate you first and foremost taking time out of your schedule. I know you're a really busy man. I've been doing my research on YouTube. You are very, very active. Probably the best place to start is Newcastle yesterday. Great 2-0 win against Everton. Your opinion on it? Expected, unexpected? What did you think of the overall performance itself?
Wow. Thanks for having us on, lads. By the way, it's lovely to have a little bit of time out from doing my own podcast and NUFC Matters to come and do something else. Completely unexpected, lads. It has to be said. I predicted a 2-0 defeat. I couldn't see where our next 3 points were coming from. Steve Bruce has been getting what we would call in the Northeast absolute pelters from the fans because he just hasn't, he hasn't been able to get the team to perform to the standards he managed to get them to perform to last season. And it's been an annus horribilis for Newcastle United fans. And to be honest, we felt as if we were hurtling towards relegation until yesterday. And although one result doesn't make the season, it really did feel as if we'd turned a massive corner yesterday. And none of that is down to Steve Bruce taking the gloves off and, doing it his way, as he'd said a couple of weeks ago. I think a lot of it has to be down to the fact that we've brought in another coach who seemed to be very active on the sidelines yesterday. And we seem to have gone for tactics as opposed to tic-tacs. And, it seemed to have worked. We had players who were busting a gut to play for the black and white stripes of Newcastle United. And it was well received, and long may it continue. That's the fickleness of football fans. I'm afraid we have a situation where, 48 hours ago, it was doom and gloom. We were all predicting relegation. 48 hours on, we're all talking about staying up and looking forward to the takeover going through. So it's a strange situation being a Newcastle fan, especially in the social media age, it has to be said.
Yeah. No, I mean, look, I see what you mean about the 48-hour difference. I mean, in 48 hours time, what we're going to be saying again, I mean, after the next game, I think the main problem after the last game was that we've been playing Bruce ball for so long, and now we're talking about Jones ball like it's going to be, the thing to revolutionise the Prem. So, like you said, it has definitely been a weird time. I mean, I'll play devil's advocate. I know some of the stuff that we played was good, but the 2 goals that we scored, I mean, it was a bit of a weird header from a corner, the first one. You don't usually see headers go in from that far, and we'd have to say that if Little Arms had longer arms, then perhaps he would have saved it. And with the second one, they were just playing for the break. So I would like to see them continue with the performances, but they do definitely need to show a little bit of cutting edge still, I think.
I think the warning was there from the first half, though. Richarlison bizarrely was given the job of Martin Wilson, and you remember that first header that Wilson had, which crashed against the bar. He should have done better with it, a lot of people thought, but Richarlison left his man, so the warning sign was there. And then, to get the opportunity again, with 16 minutes remaining, Richarlison left his man again, and Wilson this time made no mistake. It was a good goal. Second goal, it was the reward that Lewis deserved for his hard work. I looked at the heat map that Newcastle United put on their official Twitter a little bit earlier today. In fact, I used it on one of our shows. And, Lewis had his best game in a black and white shirt. He did what everybody was expecting him to do from the start of the season when he came from Norwich, getting down that left-hand side and whipping crosses in. And it's because he had somebody in front of him, doing the work to allow him to do that, to get forward. And the ball that he put through for Wilson was superb. So, look, it was 2 good goals. It was a clean sheet. It was a vastly improved performance. Anything would have been better than some of the rubbish we've had to watch recently. We're not getting carried away. And, it's just the performance that we wanted. It's what we needed. And I've got to say, I spent a bit of time, obviously, analysing the whole, Bruce Jones scenario. And I felt that Steve Bruce, to take the pressure off himself, to maybe take the embarrassment off himself, should have mentioned Graeme Jones yesterday. Instead, he didn't give him a mention at all. The people who interviewed him on BT Sports and Match of the Day were too maybe concerned about asking him in case he took the huff. Of course, he was asked about Graeme Jones coming in previously, and he didn't want to talk about it. So, maybe there was a little bit of, apprehension from interviewers' behalves to talk to him about it. But, look, Graeme Jones has obviously had an impression, and I've had a bit of stick on Twitter today. People go, well, you were saying he's a load of rubbish, just before the game. Well, yeah, because you look at his CV and it is rubbish. He was involved in Bournemouth getting relegated. He was involved in the relegation with West Brom, although it was, he wasn't there a great deal of time, but he was on Darren Moore's coaching staff. And he was also involved at Luton Town when they were struggling. However, on the flip side of that, he was part of the very successful Belgian backroom staff with Robert Martinez. So, look, there's probably more negatives on his CV than there is positives, but he's got off to a good start, obviously, at Newcastle. And coming off the pitch, seeing the players, making a beeline for him as opposed to making a beeline for Bruce, for me, spoke volumes. And I personally feel Graeme Jones has, certainly given us a bit of a bounce, which normally comes from a new manager. And let's face it, when you look at what happened on, when he arrived at the club, it felt like a new manager was coming in. I've never seen a new coach come in and get so much attention. He had a suit on. There was, photographs of him in the stand, photographs of him in the changing room. I mean, he did everything but cut a ribbon and kiss a baby.
Yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. And it is odd, isn't it, that when a coach comes in, it's kind of everyone sort of turns a blind eye to it, to be honest. Almost it's irrelevant. But then he came in and there seemed to be this, the Messiah, sort of the savior sort of vibe to him. It concerns me a little because he's only been there 24 hours. And if he's been able to, look, we don't know exactly what impact he's had, whether it was him that maybe influenced Bruce to maybe change to a diamond formation, we don't know. But if it was him and he's been there 24 hours and he's been able to have that effect on the players, then why on earth have we still got Bruce? Why on earth has he been able to have that impact when he's got essentially a boss on top of him, which is Steve Bruce?
You see, he's only been there 24 hours. He was there at the Leeds game, and it was a notable movement from Jones. In fact, he moved quicker than some of our players have in recent games by running down from the stand, and he clearly went into the changing rooms and had a chat with Steve Bruce prior to the second half. And there was a vast improvement in the second half against Leeds, although we didn't get the result we wanted. So I think he's been involved a little bit longer than 24 hours, and I think that has had the effect. As for Bruce, we won't get rid of Steve Bruce. Mike Ashley won't get rid of Steve Bruce. And the reason being, it's going to cost him money. And the deal has been done with PCP, with, PIF and the Rubens, and there will be a set price. So if you want to sack Steve Bruce, you're going to have to pay for it yourself, Mike, because otherwise it's going to come off the top end of the deal. That's the way I would look at it. And my understanding is that we're not too far away from this takeover. The arbitration, whether that has to take place or whether it takes place and we see some kind of resolution, I am convinced that the takeover will go through. I've maintained 100% attitude, now since 2017, since I met Amanda Staveley. But over the last 12 months, I've maintained, 100% convinced that this takeover is going to go through, despite the issues that we've had with the Premier League, despite the problem that they've had with the piracy issue. Things all seem to be aligning and, falling in line now for this takeover to go through. There seems to be peace now between Saudi and Qatar. It's only a matter of time before various, litigations will be dropped. And the Premier League seem to be getting what they want with the TV deal. So, I just genuinely feel that there will be a lack of fight from the Premier League, and there'll be more of an inclination to find some middle ground. So yeah, that's why they won't get rid of Steve Bruce. I think they will leave that to the incoming owners, and it will be their decision whether they stick with Bruce or whether they bring their own man in.
Yeah, interesting about the takeover that you mentioned. That it would be terrific, not just for Newcastle, but for the Premier League. I've been to Newcastle myself a couple of times, had a tour of the ground, and it's such a beautiful city, and it's got so much potential. And I always think to myself, what if? That's the question that always surrounds Newcastle United. What if? And I think recent history, you could say they've made a lot of mistakes, whether it's the takeover not happening, Mike Ashley, Steve Bruce, various other things. in your personal opinion, so to speak, in recent history, what has been the one single biggest mistake Newcastle United have made?
In my time following the club, it would have to be Kevin Keegan not being replaced by the right manager. They should have really replaced him with Sir Bobby Robson. Obviously, they tried, but Sir Bobby is a man of his word and didn't want to come at that time. So they should have found somebody who could have taken the mantle on and taken it that next step. Instead, they brought Kenny Dalglish, who was a big name, but who was on the decline as a manager. And there was no real long-term success for Dalglish. I mean, yes, he won the league, player manager, wonderful achievement. But to bring Kenny Dalglish to Newcastle at that time, I think was a rather strange move with hindsight. And, look, Kevin was given the money, he was given the support. If he didn't get his own way, it's been publicised that he walked away on more than one occasion and had to be persuaded to come back. I think the fact that Kevin actually scrapped the reserves at one point was probably a massive, downward effect on Newcastle, because it left us without any chance of players coming through the academy and progression. It was just buy-in success, and I think that really affected the club long term because we had to. Dalglish often talks about having to reintegrate the youth and the reserves and bring that back into Newcastle. And he said, I remember interviewing him when he first came to the club in '97, and he said to me, he says, it's going to affect the club by about 10 years. It's going to take 10 years to repair this damage, and he was right, because we didn't have anybody really coming through, in the academy until maybe 10 years later. But that would have to be the biggest mistake in recent times. I don't look at the Ashley era as a mistake. He bought the club, we're led to believe, on a whim. Maybe the stories about him having a bet, and that was why he bought the club. It wouldn't surprise us with with the way Mike Ashley is. He's a businessman. He's got a lot of money, and I can imagine him saying, "Well, yeah, I'll buy the club," and he does it. Some people think that it was to buy on and sell on quite quickly. That was never the plan. He's a shrewd businessman. He's bought the club for one reason and one reason only, and that is to promote his sports brand globally, which he did. And he did it in a remarkable way, because he came to the club and essentially, instead of doing what most people would have done, which is stick his logo on the front of our strips and have 52,000 people being a walking advert for it and trying to invest in the team and get us as high as possible. I think he would have done that originally, but then he fell foul of the fans very early on. The fans didn't like what he was doing early on, and instead he turned the fans against himself, but then also turned the fans against each other. He divided and conquered, and he basically got us all to protest against him. And by doing that, he had us basically promoting his business on a regular basis. So, we were, whether it's standing outside his shops, well, of course, that gets newspaper headlines, it gets TV, radio headlines. People are talking, rename the stadium. What are fans going to do? They're going to go absolutely crazy, especially when they realise you're not getting any financial reimbursement for it. What happened was the fans organised a funeral. I was asked to be the vicar. I'm walking up to the ground dressed in a borrowed cassock, doing a sermon outside the ground. And I actually got a phone call from Derek Lambias that night to say, "Mike, enjoyed your little protest." That was when I realised what he was actually doing. He was actually playing the fans off against each other to promote his business. And you look back now and you think, wow, it's a bit bloody, it's a bit grotesque, really, is using football fans in that way. But it's a clever way of making money. From that moment on, I've never mentioned his business. On interviews, I've been very careful not to mention the name of his businesses. I haven't shopped in his shops, although that's become more difficult because he keeps buying shops that I like to go in. But I've got to be honest, I changed my policy at the end of when he said he was going to sell the club, and I knew it was a definite this time. I have reversed my decision and I've started shopping in these places. But I boycotted his shops for about 5 years, which is makes it very difficult when you're buying trainers. It's got to be said, you're paying at least 20 quid more in some styles. But yeah, look, I think a lot of people would have said getting Mike Ashley as the owner would be the worst thing we've done. I don't think it has, because especially in this pandemic, out of all the owners you would want, it's somebody who's economical with their cash, frugal with their cash. And Mike Ashley is certainly that. And he won't want to lose money. And, you know, you've got to say, and again, people will not believe what I'm saying, you know, Newcastle fans certainly won't, but ultimately he has, you know, he hasn't charged interest on the loans. You know, he wants his money back, and of course he does, but, you know, he hasn't charged us a ridiculous interest rate. He's, you know, he's done everything properly. I think at the moment, when he does eventually leave, and I'm convinced it'll be this year, people won't look back on it with as much animosity as you would think they would.
Yeah, I think one of the main criticisms of Mike Ashley, I mean, what you would say is he has run it like a business, and that is a good thing to an extent that, you know, you keep your books balanced, you don't end up in financial trouble. The problem is that if you run a football club purely as a business and not an interaction between, you know, a football club and a business, is that you will end up with a balanced book, but you just won't. You will lose money in the long term when you do suffer relegations, and you may even do that a third time around this time. Now, you were talking to us about the takeover. I did see that you know, Michael Chopra was getting involved in the conversation. He was talking about the Bellanova group in Paris, and I wasn't sure necessarily what was going on that side. I didn't know if that was necessarily smoke and mirrors, or if he was just trying to talk up a brand, but they were potentially entering the discussion for the takeover as well. I didn't know if you knew anything further about that.
Yeah, I do. And just before Reese, I just want to say that he's probably his biggest cardinal sin, Mike Ashley, is given Steve McLaren and Steve Bruce, you know, millions of pounds to spend. Yet Rafa Benitez made £11.2 million profit. I mean, that is absolutely crazy. Why didn't he give Rafa the money? But yeah, Bellanova. Michael Chopra's a good friend of mine. I know a lot of players, obviously my company, Newcastle Legends. I work with a lot of the ex-players. Michael had rang me on more than one occasion about this potential new takeover. And he did fly to Newcastle. He was coming across to see family. This was when he was allowed to do that. He wasn't breaking any COVID laws. And then he talked me through it. He showed me the proof of desire from the Bellanova group to do it. Didn't have time to analyze it all, but it looked fairly genuine. And then obviously, the news broke that there was another offer on the table. I wasn't convinced. Obviously I hadn't met anybody from the Bellanova group. Subsequently, the photographs that had been superimposed and the like didn't really enhance their reputations amongst the fan base, it has to be said. But my mindset has always been that there is only one deal on the table that Mike Ashley's interested in, and that is the PIF deal, which PCP are facilitating. The Henry Morris thing, I completely disagreed with that from the start. Obviously, one journalist in particular in the Northeast was constantly banging on about Henry Morris going to be here and he's going to do this and he's going to do that. But my indication was that was never going to happen. I can be wrong. I'm a fan with an opinion. I put my head above the parapet. I've got a lot to say. That can annoy people. But believe you me, I don't say things without doing research. And, ultimately, if I'm led up the garden path by one of my sources, then fair enough. But 9 times out of 10, I'm not. And I do get information. And I don't just get information from one side. I'll get information from both. And I have got connections, as I've said on more than one occasion, on both sides of the takeover deal, on the buyer side and on the seller side. I've worked for the club myself as the fans liaison officer, albeit that 20 years ago. But up until recently, I was working for Rafa Benitez, rather than working for the club. I worked for Rafa for 3 years, helping him meet fans and taking fans to the stadium on a match day. They approached me right at the start of Rafa's reign at the club and asked me if I would like to become involved with them, which was very nice. From my perspective, something which I'll always be thankful for. But that gave me a big insight into what is going on at the club in current times. So it's not as if I'm relying on, what the club was like 20 years ago. When Rafa left, I left, and but I know a lot of the ins and outs of Newcastle United in the present day, and as I say, that gave me some contacts at the club in this present day, and their information has always been gratefully received and very accurate.
Yeah, just to touch upon what you're saying about obviously your work with Newcastle. Clearly, you're very well connected, and social media is a beast that constantly just needs to be fed all the time. And I imagine you get bombarded every other day with people wanting, give me the inside scoop in the know, this, that, and the third. you kind of touched upon it earlier with us before we came on about social media experiences. Given that you put your sort of neck on the line as part of the position you're in, how are your social media experiences? Do you have a generally quite a positive experience, or is it starting to get to the stage with social media like it is with a lot of people where it's just a drain and it just becomes very frustrating?
It's about managing your time on social media. I had a massive issue last year in 2020, probably enhanced by the fact that, we're locked down and you can tend to pick up your phone maybe a little bit more than you would normally do to check messages. There was a bit of a character assassination attempt against me. People, bringing up old videos and photographs, being photographed with, maybe it's David Cameron, for instance, who's was the Prime Minister. I ran as a Tory against the BNP, and this was in 2007. The BNP knocked at my door, wanted me to essentially vote for them. I'm an impulsive kind of person, so I actually stood up in a heavy Labour area and said, well, who can I run for where I'm not going to get voted in? I'll run for the Tories. So I had to basically go and essentially go to Conservative meetings, etc. Yeah, I know, but stick with us on this. I went along and then I put myself up. I had to come up with policies. I had to stand in Felon Square and hand out leaflets. However, I did get to meet Michael Howard and David Cameron. I had my photograph taken with them. And these end up on social media. But that basically allows me to be called, obviously I'm not going to swear on your show, but a bald Tory, etc. So that kind of thing gets thrown at us all the time. So Tory, I don't vote Tory. I vote in the local elections, I vote Labour. In the general elections, for the last 3 general elections, I voted Liberal because I've never, I haven't agreed with any of the leaders, and Liberal just seems like not wasting the vote. That's what I've done. That's my choice. Not that really my politics should really bother anybody, but they seem to think it's an insult. However, I've also been photographed with Tommy Robinson. Now, Tommy's obviously a football fan. That's how I know him. I know him through, Luton Town, and I know him as Stephen, of course, Stephen Yaxley. But he's become quite prominent in politics. But he came to the Northeast. He watched an England game in a bar that I was in, and a couple of lads who I know wanted a photograph with me and him. Of course, that got onto social media. So suddenly, Steve Wraith is the leader of the EDL. So that gets thrown at us. But what happened at the back end of last year was basically I got thrown into the pit with these trolls, and they chucked all this abuse at me. They then picked a video that I'd done with Sean Atwood, which was, Sean's got 650,000 subscribers. He got us on to talk about various books that I've done. And ultimately, he asked me about my doorman career. I worked in security and did the door for 18 years. And I was talking about a specific bar that I worked at where, the manager who worked there would, basically allow men who'd maybe grew up to a woman's backside to come back in the following week. So suddenly I'm a sex case. I'm somebody who agrees with groping women. Yeah. So all of this was thrown at us in the space of 2 weeks. And it was about 4 or 5 people who were basically doing it, but then it just grew and grew and grew. So I found myself having to defend myself on a regular basis, as well as doing the work that I normally do on social media, which for me was draining. It was annoying. Yeah. And I'd probably let it get to us. But then what happened was I decided to make a documentary. I thought I'm gonna turn it round here. I'm gonna turn it round on the trolls. I'm gonna have a pop at them, but do it properly. So I spoke to one of the guys who I make documentaries with, and I said, would you be up to doing something? I'm going to do a social media campaign called Think Before You Tweet, and I would like to make a documentary. And the idea would be to try and find some of these trolls to see if they're willing to talk and get them on a documentary. So that's basically what we did. We did it in the back end of last year. We did it over a 6-week period. We did it in a socially distanced way. It was before the second lockdown. So we filmed this we start end of October, start of November. And 2 people came forward, two quite prolific tweeters, who basically have abused each other to the point where, it's got completely out of control. And we did a 2-hour documentary. It's available on my Steve Wraith YouTube channel. It's available as a download on Amazon Prime. And you know what? It actually helped, because I found a lot more people were coming forward going, wow, I am thinking before I tweet now. I am realizing what the consequences of what I'm saying are. Has it stopped the trolls? No. I've had a lot more dialogue with some of them though, which is positive. But yeah, it is very hard. It's a long way around talking about giving you an answer to the question. But I had to tell you my experiences for you to understand where I'm coming from. Since then, have I learned anything? Yeah, I probably have. I need to, probably ignore these people a lot more. I was blocking a lot of people, and it seems that upsets people. People who want to have an opinion, they might want to say something against you. I was blocking people because I thought, well, I haven't got the time. I've got a lot of people on my Twitter account. I've got about 38,000 now, and that is an extreme amount of people asking you the same question or giving you grief.
Yeah.
So I am more careful what I tweet. Definitely. I don't give people false hope. I only put something out there if I feel it's necessary. And I know, Reese, you probably watch my timeline, quite a bit with regards to Newcastle. Sometimes I've got to put something out there because there'll be another fan who is what I would consider high profile, who might put something out which I think is misleading on the other side. And that was the case last night. Somebody put something out last night, and I just felt sometimes you've got to react, because if you don't, then I know I'm going to get bombarded with people saying, well, this person said that. And it is difficult. Is there any such thing as an in the know account? Yes, there is. There are people on Twitter who are vastly in the know. Are those people going to reveal themselves properly? Are they going to say, this is who I'm speaking to? Well, of course they're not. And not because they've signed NDAs, not because they're breaching confidentiality, because they're in a position of trust and they're not going to say anything. But look, I'm sure the truth will out. If this takeover goes through as it should do in the next few months, or if this takeover collapses, as some people would like it to in the next few months, whatever happens, the truth will out, and then everybody will see who was telling the truth. And I'll guarantee you there'll be some very, very, very embarrassed people on the Newcastle Twitter timeline.
No, absolutely. Yeah. And like you said, I have seen over the last few months certain things transpire and certain conflicting reports from different sources that about the same kind of information, pretty much always about the takeover. And I think a lot of the time last year when especially yourself were blowing up all over my newsfeed was during the takeover. And I think a lot of the abuse that perhaps might get directed, to people like yourself is often just channeled frustration, not to excuse it, but just channeled frustration, because when you have ex-pros like Olivier Bernard, just to name one, coming out and saying, something's about to happen, and all these vague but somehow positive tweets that people grasp onto, and then you might have people like yourself saying, it's not done yet, or it's imminent, or all the different buzzwords that we use. I think people tend to pick a side, and if they're not on that side, then they tend to channel frustration in that way.
I feel so sorry for some of the ex-players because they do get drawn into it. And, you mentioned Ollie, Steve Howie was a victim of it very early on as well, where he said something, he'd heard something from somebody who was a reliable source, put something out there, and then he got pelters for it as well. It's unfortunate. The thing that really pushed me to do the documentary was somebody turning up in my street, though. Once we put out that essentially we're going to do this documentary, I had a well-known troll turn up in my street when I was on the school run. And for me, that just drew the line at that. I thought, you've actually it's not somebody I know. He's actually gone to the bother of finding out my address and turning up in my street. And I was angry. I make no bones about it. I was very angry that he'd done that. And, I went out onto Twitter later that day and I was still absolutely foaming 2 hours later. And I think people saw that. And, I didn't do that for I'm the victim, give me sympathy. I did it because it was the only way I knew to get me frustration out, and the only way that I could get my message out to him and the other trolls that this just wasn't acceptable. And to be fair, some of the other trolls basically agreed that it wasn't acceptable, but it hasn't stopped them continuing, doing what they do. And I don't call a troll somebody who disagrees with us, Reese. If somebody disagrees with us, that's fair enough. Nobody is going to 100% agree, and there's always going to be two sides to the story. You might think Joe Linton's the best player in the world and he was well worth 40 million. I might think that Joe Linton's absolutely garbage and he shouldn't be anywhere near our football club. That's football, that's an opinion. But that doesn't mean you inbox us and say that my wife should be raped, or you turn up in my street when I'm doing the school run. And that's the kind of stuff that I get. Only 3 weeks ago on Instagram, and I posted it on Twitter, some guy, no idea who he is, clearly, you know, the name was there. I'm not going to say the name. I put the tweet, I put the actual screenshot out. But the guy said I should be dead. I should die. I'm a narcissist and I should die. I'm a pathologist or a psychologist or something like that. But I can't remember. I get a few of these, and from my perspective, do I lie awake at night worried about it? No. But, from my perspective, it takes somebody really, really, warped to actually do that and to say those kind of things. And I'm glad I did the documentary. It's raised awareness. I'm glad we did the campaign. It's raised awareness, although it still gets thrown back in my face. There's people who contribute to the NUFC Matters channel. And, they're basically, any tweet they put out now, the trolls are going, #be kind, or that's not very think before you tweet. And, you can't win. But look, we did it for the right reasons. And we're channeling the right way. We're doing things for charities. We've raised now £2,000 for the Newcastle Food Bank, just by doing T-shirts, off the cuff T-shirts. From yesterday's performance against Everton, we've just done, qtechshop.co.uk, one of our sponsors, has just done an Indiana Jones T-shirt with Graeme Jones's face in. So, we're doing things in the right spirit, in the right way, exactly like your podcast, lads. You're doing it because you enjoy it. You're doing it for your own mental health, and you're doing it to cheer people up at home in the worst possible time that we could all be living through. So, more credit to you guys, and credit to everybody who works and comes and does the shows for me on NUFC Matters, because it's much appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. And what would reply to that as well? I mean, in our line of entertainment and our media, in which we do, the way in which we do it, there are followers and there are leaders, essentially, and the content creators are the leaders in this example, and the followers are the people who obviously subscribe to those channels and get involved and comment on things and what have you. And I always say that with us, you don't have to necessarily like our content, you don't have to agree with it. But if you do disagree with it, you do feel strongly about it, and you do end up having these emotions because of it, just have a chat with us. Hit us up in the socials. We're more than happy to talk to you about it, but don't make it personal, and don't attack us over it. We're just people with an opinion, and there's no room in this for any of that. We're just people trying, like you said, for our own mental health, creating content, talking about the sport that we love, and we all love the sport. It's what brings us all together. And like I said, when you're getting messages like that, it's just not appropriate.
No, it's sad. It's sad, unfortunately. And getting back to the Mike Ashley divide and conquer thing, it's why a lot of the fans, probably don't get on social media. There's quite a bit of that. I'm not sure whether it's the same for other football clubs. Is it the same for Man United? Is it the same for Liverpool?
100%, yeah. 100%.
It is.
Man United Twitter is just beyond toxic. It is just,
But there we go. So it's not just a Newcastle problem, but when you're in the bubble of being a Newcastle fan and that's on your timeline, then that's all you see. So you don't see it happening with other people. But I can imagine it probably is. But yeah, it's sad, and I think as well as there is a bit of rivalry as well. It has to be said, because our podcast was literally just started off at the start of the very first lockdown. It was started off as an entertainment to keep me sane and essentially to entertain Newcastle fans. But there's plenty other podcasts out there, and I think maybe there's a little bit of rivalry now because we're the new kids on the block. We're only new, but we've amassed a massive amount of subscribers in a short space of time. People enjoy what we do. There's a vast amount of content. I do one show a day. I can't help it. I'm doing it for my own sanity, and I'm doing it because people enjoy it, and because the people who've got involved in the shows enjoy doing their shows. So I've created a rod for my own back in a lot of ways. And, if we ever get back to normal, will I still be able to do 7 shows a week? I very much doubt it. But I know that a lot of the people who are on the channel want to continue doing what they're doing. So, I've one of the lads, Daz and Martin and Chris, they've gone off and done their own show. They're doing it on my channel to start with, but their aim is to do a show and set that up. We've got Kendall and Alicia on Ladies Night who have got their own YouTube channels. They're doing their own thing. And I love that, and I make sure that when they're on my show that I give them the chance to plug their show, because, it's in their channel, try to get their subscribers up, because I am, aware that if I can get back to my normal life, that I will be very busy. I do so many different things. And, I would like to keep a presence because I like to speak about Newcastle. I'm very opinionated on it. And if it gives us an opportunity to make sure my point's put across without it being, warped or changed or altered, then, keeping a couple of those shows going might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, interesting. The documentary I'm definitely going to check out. You've really captured my attention with that.
I'll send you the link.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I'll give you a prime example of how this is kind of filtered into everyday life. And I think there's a responsibility now with big tech to really start clamping down on it, not just from a football standpoint. Obviously, we all saw, I think it was Marcus Rashford, Tuanzebe, Martial, all suffering racial abuse from people with no profile pictures and about 8 numbers in their sort of handles. Just bizarre people. But I put out a tweet the other day. I just happened to be watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, very generic tweet, right? I just put out, I don't like the show. I don't think Jeremy Clarkson is a great presenter. And I was just shocked at how the hate I was bombarded with. I had one guy tell me to commit suicide, right? Because I don't like Jeremy Clarkson as a TV presenter. And it just got me thinking. I was like, if I didn't need to be on social media, would I even be on there? And I look at someone like yourself, Stephen, like you said, you get pelters. And I just think to myself, what is wrong with the world? What on earth is wrong with the world and these people? Like a very simple tweet. And the guy was like, why didn't you commit suicide? And I was like, well, it's not that deep, mate. I just turned the channel over. Do you mean I watched Discovery Network instead? I'm not that arsed on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. But it got me thinking, I suppose, about the sort of the bigger picture and football and the way these footballers have to deal with it. Because I think, again, sometimes, Steve, we take footballers for granted. They are human beings. They're not robots. Some of them are just working class lads. They come from, poor backgrounds, very limited backgrounds, and all of a sudden this is all thrust upon them. Out of curiosity, when you were sort of, I wouldn't know if the working with Newcastle is the right word, or maybe liaising with Newcastle, did social media ever come up and sort of how Newcastle handle things at all? Because I'd be interested to know how a big club looks at social media.
When I was at Newcastle the first time round, it was too early for social media. It was before Twitter and before Facebook. The online presence left a lot to be desired, though. The communication between the club and the fans has always been second rate. There's been very little communication over the years. It's one of the biggest gripes that Newcastle fans have as a fan base with their own club. I think over the last couple of years, it has to be said that Newcastle's Twitter has been better. However, in the early reign of Mike Ashley, it was a much publicised spat. The club Twitter actually attacked me as an outspoken fan. I can't remember the exact wording of it, but it's there if you Google it. Newcastle Twitter, a club attacks fan. Simon Bird, I think, covered it in the Mirror. But yeah, I mean, it's improved, and I think the YouTube channel, when we had lockdown, they put on the games against Man United, the 5-0, against Barcelona, the 3-2, the Arsenal game, the 4-4, and this, that is great work by the club. The Twitter has become better. Originally, it was simply putting up stuff for Mike Ashley's sports brand, and it became awful. But it's definitely improved. I think it's more informative. They certainly have grasped it over the years, but I think it's taken them a while to adapt to it. You've got to admit as well, it's better, even though there's a skeleton staff there, because the club furloughed the staff very early on during this whole scenario. So there's not many staff at Newcastle to start with. It's the way that Mike Ashley runs his businesses. But even less there now. So look, I'm not going to slate the club on that. I think they do a great job with the social media, and it's the one thing they get right on communication, because they're still, we've been in this pandemic now for best part of a year, and we've hardly heard a peep out of the chief executive, Lee Charnley, which is embarrassing, really.
Yeah, do you know what? It's interesting you mentioned that, because I was going to talk about the mismanagement of Newcastle, be it via the team itself or the communication to the local people. How has that mismanagement affected the local community? Because I can see, we'll touch upon it in a bit, that your podcast is very community-based. And that's what I like about Newcastle fans as a club. It is very community-based. So how has that mismanagement over the past few years really affected the local community?
It's affected the local community in a lot of ways, but it's energized them to go and do things themselves. So the food bank was a fans initiative. It took some wonderful people, the likes of Bill Corcoran and Steve Hasty, to basically start getting themselves together with other like-minded fans like Colin Whittle and pulling together to set up this initiative, and it was fantastic. Great idea. It's tragedy that we have to have food banks in this day and age. Yeah. But for them to go and set that up and do what they've done and build on it and build on it and build on it, it's been fantastic, and it's been much needed during the pandemic. The club, though, have got the foundation. The work is tireless by the foundation. They do a lot of work. I know there's Josh Banyard, who does a lot for mental health. The game changer project that they have, so there is signs of life within the club occasionally to do things, and they do work with the community, but it's very few and far between, and that's the kind of thing which, when I spoke to Amanda Staveley in 2017 at that Liverpool game at home, that I said that's the kind of thing that needs massively improving, and yes, we need new players. Yes, it would be nice if we had a successful team to increase the capacity at the stadium. Yes, it would be good to have a world-class manager, and it would be great to get to cup finals. But, there's so much more needs to be done. There needs to be money ploughed into the academy. We need to start getting back to the days where we find a Gaza, a Waddle and a Beardsley. And, essentially, we also want investment in the community. We need to have, working with the community, get involved with the local football teams like Wallsend Boys Club and Redheugh Boys that have created a lot of these legends, and start working with them, because you'll find some diamonds amongst the rough, and, plow a bit of money into them, help them, it's making the football club not just something that people use 9 months a season, but using it 12 months of the year. You want people to be getting married there. You want people to be getting up there and having their weddings, their christenings, their, dare I say it, their funerals, those kind of things. You want to use the club for everything. You want to make it a community hub. You want to be having an end of season do where random season ticket holders are selected from the 52,000 and invited to a big plush dinner, where the fans' awards are handed out. That's what you want to do. You want to give jobs to ex-players, where, the likes of Malcolm MacDonald, who on more than one occasion has actually been exercised from St James's, not welcome. A living legend who does our shows. He should be in the lounges, sitting with people at VIP tables, at sponsors' tables, or dare I say it, even going into the Gallagher and Lee's end, and maybe he's doing a talking within the stand just to fans. That kind of love, care, and attention is needed for our fans, because they've given so much since the club was born. Give a little back, and you'll reap more. And there's no question we're a sleeping giant. But you know what? If this takeover goes through, and it goes through with the right people, we will be the biggest club in the world, and that's what's frightening everybody.
Yeah, look, you're absolutely right what you're saying. I mean, essentially, to summarize what you're saying there, everyone just wants a club that they can be proud of again, and I don't think they've had that for a long time. I mean, I lived up in Newcastle for 3 or 4 years, a few years back, and I had a season ticket every single one of those years. And to be honest with you, the overriding emotion that I would feel when going to St James's Park was anger. And that's not really the family atmosphere that you want to introduce young fans to, and things like that. So I absolutely understand where you're coming from. And the thing that's abundantly clear is that regardless of, you can bring in 12 or 13 Graeme Joneses if you want. You can bring in as many French League, prospects as you want. The only thing that really at this point that all of us will concede will bring that new era, that renewed hope or proudness of the club, pride in the club, would be a new owner and a takeover. So what is Amanda Staveley's? I mean, you said that you've been in contact with her. Do you know what her current stance is on the whole situation of it being sort of not blocked, because it wasn't so much blocked as it was removed from the table? But what is her stance on what's going on at the moment?
The situation is simple. PIF pulled out before the takeover can be knocked back. That's where we're at. There is enough out there with, the likes of Nick DeMarco, Mike Ashley, and, the club, and Keith Patterson from NCSL on social media. There's enough there to tell you what is going on. Arbitration's the key now. And from our perspective, you want to see arbitration either go ahead and, Newcastle find in Newcastle's, favour in the sense that we can get this takeover done and we can just move on. Or, we're going to see another tank pulling onto the lawn, and that's NCSL. Keith's doing a great job. A lot of people have criticised him. He's doing it off his own back, but he's got, plenty up his sleeve. He hasn't really given us a great deal of information, but we know exactly where he stands, and that is, alongside the club, he's determined to help push this forward. Premier League, I think, have made a few positive noises in the recent weeks. Where does Amanda Staveley stand? She still wants the deal to go through. Of course she does. We've seen Mairdad, on social media, her husband, essentially, giving fans hope, I think, by, just showing that he's still tuned into this. Jamie Rubin has done the same. Positive tweets, positive messages. It's not so much where Amanda Staveley stands, it's where the club stands. And Mike Ashley's made it quite clear that he wants to sell the club and he wants this deal to go through. It's all in his hands, really. It's all in his hands with the Premier League. Amanda really can't do anything until they get the green light, I guess, from the football club that things are positive. So I think that's where we're at this moment in time. The time scale on it, I still think it'll be done before the end of the season. I think, either way, we will see a result before the end of the season. And I don't put dates and on anything. I've learned, my lesson not to do that. I think it was way back in, could it have been April last year? You tend to lose dates and times, but I think we all had a feeling it was going to be April. There was a lot of paperwork pointing towards that. And I think I put my hat on it. April seemed to be the date that everybody was agreeing with. And I was completely wrong, as was everybody else. Who could have foreseen that it was still going to be dragging on all this time forward? But yeah, I think the noise that are being made on both sides would suggest that this will be done before the end of the season. A lot of people are expecting it to go through on both sides. I would say that that's where we're at, I don't think it'll drag on. If it does drag on, I'll be as gutted as the next Newcastle fan. But I don't expect to hear anything from, the buyer side unless there's a deal goes through. And if a deal goes through, I think that's when we'll hear from them. Other than that, what have they got to say? If the deal collapses, will we hear from them? Yes. And I think that's why I've always been very positive, because we obviously knew the PIF had withdrawn. There was a statement. We saw the social media comment, the statement from the Rubens. We knew that there'd been a withdrawal. However, we didn't get a finality. We had an interview with George Culkin from Amanda Staveley's point of view, but we didn't have, basically a submission. We didn't have, that's it. Thanks for, supporting us. We'll give it our best shot, and that's it. We didn't have that. So I think we all know then that it's still a possibility. And then with Mike Ashley coming out and saying that, we're going to fight this on all terms. And Nick DeMarco, his recent tweet about, having the meeting with Newcastle at the Arsenal game tells you that it's still ongoing. There's just so many reasons for positivity that, I think we should all just, concentrate on the football, hope Newcastle United stay up, and, keep saying that prayer at the end of each day. But I do feel it'll go through. I refuse to be negative on it, and I'm still 100%.
Yeah, interesting, mate. Speaking of positivity and investment, so to speak, obviously today's the last day of the transfer window, so unless a miracle happens, I doubt anything's going to go through now. But were there any particular players that Newcastle were linked with in the window that sort of had any legs in terms of any movement?
Not really. I don't see Lingard wanting to come to Newcastle. I don't think that was ever a possibility at all. Yeah. I'm very concerned about the players that we're letting go, because if we're not going to bring anybody in, then, you know, I can't see the logic in it. I mean, obviously, we've lost Yendlin to Galatasaray. I think that was always going to happen. You know, good servant of the club. I think he was treated rather poorly in his time here, towards the back end of his time at the club. You know, never let us down, and, you know, played very well under Rafa. Richie concerns me. He's one of my favourite players. He's a blue chip player. We are still in a relegation battle despite the win against Everton, and I would like to have seen him stay. Dwight Gale, you know, clearly doesn't want to sign a new contract because he doesn't want to, you know, sign a new contract and sit on the bench. I find that situation bizarre because, you know, Steve Bruce has gone out on a limb on more than one occasion and said he's one of his biggest fans, loved to play him. You know, what's gone on there? There's clearly been some kind of fallout, a dispute. No smoke without fire. There's clearly an issue between him and Sean Longstaff. And that is the reason that Sean Longstaff's not getting the game. There was talk of a move to Valencia on loan, but that has apparently collapsed. You know, surely we can't have a manager who is not playing Matty Longstaff because he's fell out with his brother. Surely not. But we've got a bizarre manager and we've got a bizarre situation that's developed. Did he fall out with ASM? Was it COVID? I don't think we'll ever know. Some things are leaking out the dressing room. Other things aren't. I just think it's a rather strange time for us. And this transfer window was always going to be difficult for everybody because it's the first January window during COVID. People really are going to be economical with their cash. We don't know what the future of, you know, the UK is going to be like in this next 12 months. It's the first transfer window under Brexit, after Brexit. So there's a lot of things to be considered. And I think that's probably why it's been a very, very, very quiet window, not just for Newcastle, but for everybody. Chowdhury is still the name getting mentioned.
Yeah.
It looks potentially as if he could come to Newcastle. Maybe it's a good reason for Richie leaving if Chowdhury's coming in. I wouldn't want those two opposite each other in the dressing room after that horrendous challenge. But yeah, look, Chowdhury comes in. Is it like for like? I wouldn't be disappointed if Chowdhury comes in. He's a decent enough body.
Yeah.
But I just think we're leaving ourselves wide open at full back, left back, with Richie going. You know, it's not my preferred choice for playing Richie, but he did a good job in there when required. It leaves us with Dummett as cover. I mean, Lewis was superb against Everton. It's definitely his best game in a black and white shirt. But it leaves us with Dummett as cover, and, you know, Dummett's knackered again. You know, after Bruce, you know, used his run it off philosophy to play him in recent games. So I don't know. I'm pinning a lot of faith after yesterday on Graeme Jones, because I do believe that even if we lose those players and don't bring anybody in, that as long as we don't get hit with a horrendous injury run, that we've still got more than enough quality to stay up. And I still believe that there's probably 3 worse teams than Newcastle in the Premier League this year. And I think it'll be a record low for points for staying up. I think that I don't think we'll need to hit 40 points. I think, you know, you could be as low as 32 or 30. You know, maybe he's not more than 35, but could be as low as 32 to stay up this season.
Yeah, interesting about Graeme Jones. I read just an article about him the other day. You may have seen it yourself, and he was talking about his appointment, and he used a phrase which I found very strange. He said, "I'm here to offer a neutral opinion." What do you think he meant by that?
Yeah, I found that strange as well. I mean, it depends. It depends what you read into it. But I get the impression. Maybe there's a dispute going on between maybe Steve Bruce and Lee Charnley. Yeah. You know, Charnley brought Bruce in. It wasn't his. You know, he wasn't on his list. You know, I've mentioned this on numerous occasions, but, you know, we were rejected 11 times by 11 different people, and Bruce put himself forward for the job. So he wasn't on Charnley's list. We then had to buy Steve Bruce out of his contract to bring him to Newcastle, which is bizarre.
Yeah.
But maybe there's been a little bit of a fallout between them. Certainly there won't be a fallout between Bruce and Agnew and co, because they're all pals. But maybe he's been brought in as a buffer between them, or maybe he's been brought in as a buffer between him and the players. You know, there's clearly players in that dressing room, like in every dressing room, who are quite strong-willed minded and, you know, have got their own opinions. And in this day and age, players can rule a dressing room if you allow them to. You know, Rafa didn't allow that. That's why the likes of Shelby found himself out of the picture at St James's Park. You know, very outspoken in the dressing room. You know, clearly if you speak out against somebody who's won, you know, more medals and awards than you have, then, you know, you're going to find yourself out on a limb. And I think that's what happened with Shelby. Maybe Bruce isn't that kind of person. Bruce strikes me as a man manager. He's quite liked in the football world. A lot of ex-players get on very well with him. We've seen it with the glowing recommendations he's had from people up until recently. But yeah, he seems to be, you know, more like a man manager. He's the kind of person who I can imagine putting his arm around somebody and saying, "Oh, I will have a pint," you know, rather than, you know, sitting down and saying, "Look, you're not hitting the back of the net. I think you need to do a little bit extra practice. Get out there and do it." You know what I mean? It's that kind of stuff. So I don't know. It could have so many interpretations of that. But I did find it strange for him to say that. But I found the whole unveiling of Graeme Jones strange. As you say, it felt like a new manager coming in. That's what it felt like. And especially after yesterday's result, it felt like a new manager coming in.
Yeah, I mean, I found it all. I still do find it all bizarre. And you know, just to give you a Jack Grealish quote here, like you said, a lot of ex-pros, and you probably know what I'm about to say, but a lot of ex-pros are coming out and saying great things about Steve Bruce. I don't know why, I don't know how, but they are. But Jack Grealish came out and said recently that he found his training sessions bizarre. He said Steve Bruce would bring out a ball in training, throw it on the floor, and say play. And that would be the extent of their training sessions. And I found that absolutely ridiculous to hear. And you said, obviously, that Graeme Jones coming in act as a neutral point. I'm not sure, because in my mind, because of the bizarreness of the situation, it almost feels like he's been brought in and there's secret conversations being had that he's going to end up the manager by the end of the season and that he's going to oust Steve Bruce. And I don't know how that feeling has come about, but I know there's a lot of people thinking it, Steve, and I didn't know if you're getting that impression at all, that there's something not quite right about the whole situation. What kind of manager has 3 assistants? None that I can think of anyway. It sounds to me like he's being groomed.
He didn't know anything about it. He claims he did, but then, you know, the bizarre thing that Bruce said was when he was interviewed when he'd arrived was, well, he'd be another pair of eyes. I mean, if you've wanted to headhunt this guy and bring him in, he's not another pair of eyes. He's somebody who's going to enhance your opportunities on the training ground and help you to be a better team. He knew nothing about it. And his initial interview, when he was asked about it, he didn't want to speak about it. So there's no doubt that Graeme Jones has been brought in as a plan B. It is a clever move in the sense that should the takeover collapse, then Mike Ashley doesn't want to go down the avenue of potentially bringing in a big name manager because he doesn't want to be paying big wages because of the situation he finds himself in. And Graeme Jones would be ideal for the Championship. He's obviously speaks to people. He speaks to people in football. I think the talk of Graham Carr was wide of the mark. I don't think that he is the man that Ashley speaks to anymore. But he clearly does speak to people who give him advice. And 9 times out of 10, the people he's spoken to in football have been the wrong people and given him the wrong advice. Look, Graeme Jones, is he going to be the next manager? I hope not. I hope the takeover goes through. And it's, you know, for me, if it's Amanda Staveley's consortium that comes in, I would expect to see Rafa Benitez back as manager for the start of next season. If it's, if it's a case of the takeover collapsing, I expect, and Newcastle do manage to stay up by the skin of their teeth, I expect Bruce to see his contract out, and then Graeme Jones will probably take over. But it's a strange situation. It really is. I don't understand. Nobody does. Nobody I've spoken to in football understands it. I wasn't the only person to slate Graeme Jones either. You know, I'm sure everybody saw Rob Lee's tweet, who's on Twitter. And he was quite scathing of him as well. But as I said, one result doesn't change all of that, and I do feel that it was down to him, that result yesterday. I can't see him being manager of Newcastle. I think this current coaching staff will be out on a limb by the time we come round to the summer.
Do you know, it's interesting you say that. We had Warren Barton on the podcast a while back, and there was this kind of swell of anticipation about sort of the Newcastle, the managerial role. And I just happened to log onto Twitter a few days running, and I kept seeing Warren Barton throw his hat in the ring, talking about how he'd like to be Newcastle manager. And then obviously Newcastle fans were feeding off it. And we asked the question the other day on the podcast, should ex-players that have played for certain clubs go back and manage those clubs? Because, you know, it's a bit of a poison chalice. You look at Solskjaer now at Manchester United. He's had a bit, he's had a difficult time. Arteta's had a difficult time. Zidane is having a difficult time at Real Madrid. I think the next logical one would probably be Gerrard replacing Klopp at some point. But if a Warren Barton decided to do it, or Mike Ashley offered it to him for whatever reason, or another Newcastle legend, is that something you'd fall in line with and be okay with? Or would you want someone that's a bit more established now?
Look, sometimes it works, other times it doesn't, and it depends on the circumstances. I still believe Alan Shearer would make a good manager at Newcastle, but he was given no chance at all by Mike Ashley. Really, he was given, you know, the back end of the season to try and turn a relegation team around, and then, you know, wasn't given the decency of a phone call to come back in and give him the opportunity to get Newcastle promoted. I found that wrong. Yeah, look, Lee Clark's put his hat in the ring. Warren Barton's put his hat in the ring. Nikos Dabazas would love to be director of football. David Ginola said he would love to be involved. Why not get a consortium of the entertainers? You know, bring them in and give them the opportunity. You know, I think it would be a wonderful dream. I don't think it'll ever be reality, but I would like to see it. Nobby Solano is another one. I've spoken to them all over the years, and you know, got to know them all well, and they would all love to be involved in some capacity. Steve Howie would. He's got his coaching badges. Steve Watson would as well. Les Ferdinand's a director of football, as we know. You know, there's so many of them are ex players have all done their coaching badges and would all love to be involved in Newcastle. But yeah, I mean, bringing those players in and as part of a consortium, it would be a brave move, but you know, probably one that would go down well with fans, and I'm sure they could work it out between them. But yeah, it's I don't have any issue with that at all, and everybody has to start somewhere. I think that there's a lot of that in recent years at some of the bigger clubs. Would never have expected Frank Lampard to manage Chelsea. Of course, you know, he's just been sacked, but, you know, you would never have expected that. He did a great job. He was used by Abramovich because they didn't have any option of buying players. They knew that Lampard would come and do it because he's Chelsea through and through. They knew that he would essentially be able to work with the youngsters, which he proved he could at Derby, and he did a fantastic job there. And you know, unfortunately, hasn't been given the time to turn things around this season. I'll turn it around. They were top of the Premier League in December, but then Gerrard's gone to Scotland, different league, not as tough as the Premier League. Tough in the respect that, you know, you're expected to win the league if you're Rangers or Celtic. The rest of the teams fight for the scraps. But, you know, again, maybe it's a slightly easier league for him to learn his craft in. And he could stay there 10 years and, you know, and make Rangers a bastion of invincibility and beat Celtic's, you know, records. But look, it's one of those things, you know, everyone has to start somewhere. It's good to see young coaches or new coaches given the opportunity. So why not Newcastle?
Yeah, no, Warren Barton was ready to jump on a flight. I think he had his passport and his bags packed, ready to come over. Obviously, you touched upon a lot of ex-Newcastle players there. And when we look back at the Newcastle history, there's some fantastic players. We'll ask you in a moment, actually, for your greatest Newcastle 1 to 11. But just obviously having, you know, witnessed greatness in terms of the ex-Newcastle players and interviewed them and found out about them on a personal level and their characteristics, what are the current Newcastle players missing compared to the ex-players? Is it just talent, or is there another ingredient that's missing?
I think the current team, it's just buying into the whole ethos of the club. You know, the players and managers that do well at our club get the area, they fall in love with the area. And some have and some haven't, you know. I guess the likes of, you know, Rob Elliott, for example, the goalkeeper, you know, when he was here, he got it. He bought into the concept of the area, loved it. He wanted to move here, you know, and I just, Nobby Solano, Rob Lee, Malcolm MacDonald, all of these players in our history, who've come up. Pavel Srnicek, God bless him, who became part of the Newcastle United family. And they're back in the area all the time. They always want to be here. That entertainers team won absolutely nothing, but they won the hearts of the fans, and that's what you want from your team, And it doesn't take a great deal. Just put a bit of effort in when you're wearing that black and white shirt every single game you play. And that's it. And I think with social media, players can be a little bit more direct with fans. They can, ASM's come in and done it straight away. He's been down to the food bank and made drop-offs on his own off his own back in his early days here. He communicates with the fans as best he can on social media. And I think that's the key, really. Just make sure that you don't ignore the fan base, because the fans are essentially are the club. The fans will be here before you get here, and they'll be here after you leave. And just make sure that you respect the fans, and you respect the fans by giving them the time of day. Entertaining them when you're on the pitch, and if you bump into them in the street, just stop and say hello. You know what I mean? It doesn't take a great deal, to keep Newcastle fans pleased and happy. And I think that is the simple message I would give to any of them. The team itself just lacks direction. It doesn't have, Steve Bruce doesn't have a plan A, it doesn't have a plan B. If Jack Grealish's training session quote is anything to go by, is it any wonder? And is it any wonder that if that is the case, and Graeme Jones has come in and done, a training session, that the players suddenly have gone, wow, that's the first training session we've had, for 18 months. You know what I mean? So I think that's it, really. It's as simple as that. But this team is still the nucleus of the team that Rafa had, and they were well drilled. And if Graeme Jones can get 50% of what Rafa was getting out of them, Newcastle won't struggle, but it's in them. They know it's in them. And this team, I think what was instilled in them under Rafa was a backs to the wall mentality. We did have it slightly under Pardew, because he had to do this very us and them thing. The fans were getting on Pardew's back, and he would, we always played well when it was up against the team. If the fans were criticising Pardew, it was almost like he shut the team off from the world, and it was, right, lads, it's us against them. We've got to show them, and they did. They qualified for Europe, and I think it was similar with Rafa. He was having his battles with Mike Ashley, and he just wanted to show, look, do this, and do this, and I'll get the investment I need next year. Sadly, the investment never ever came. He was in that constant battle, but there was a fight there in the team, and that's what we saw against Everton. It was there, it was still there, and that's because some of those players that we had in the Championship season and the subsequent seasons in the Premier League, there was that mentality back. So that's all you need: positive mentality.
Yeah, very well said, mate. Very well said. So with that being said, obviously we've touched upon ex-Newcastle players and current ones. What we ask our guests is, their team, the best 1 to 11 that they've ever had, so to speak, or at least maybe in your time, so to speak. So from 1 to 11, who would be the best Newcastle team you could put together of the players that's played for Newcastle?
Okay, it's always a tough one, this, and especially with me knowing a lot of the players, because I'll get it in the neck when they watch it, so it'll be going, oh, well, thanks very much, you didn't pick me. It does get thrown back at us, but I'll always pick Pavel in goal. I had a wonderful relationship with Pavel. I thought he was a great keeper. I was his agent for 2 years as well before he passed away. But Pavel always pips the keepers for me. We've had some great ones. I mean, we've been very lucky in that position. We've got obviously Dubravka and Darlow now, but Shaka Hislop wasn't a bad turn, was he? Shea Given, Steve Harper would have been, probably had 400 appearances if it hadn't been for the keepers who were ahead of him. We've had a few bad ones as well, but we've been very lucky in that department. So he would be in goal. Right back is always a contentious one. A lot of people expect us to pick Bez. I would normally pick Bez, but my first hero was John Anderson in 83, 84. So I always go for John Anderson at right back. Solid. He wouldn't be able to play these days because he used to, take people out first and think about the ball second. He put people into the stands. I seen him do it on more than one occasion, but he would play right back for me. My two centre halves often change. Depends really on how I feel, but the ones that I've settled for on more than one occasion have been Jonathan Woodgate Still the best centre-half I've ever seen in a black and white shirt, although he didn't play half as many games as he should have because of injury. And Steve Howie. Howie was a wonderful servant at the club, 13 years at the club, and didn't get a testimonial, something which is, for me, ridiculous. One of our best players not getting a testimonial after so many years' service. Left back. I would go for John Beresford, left back. Centre midfield, again, difficult because there's so many great players that we've had in that position. But I would go for a workhorse, and I would go for a bit of talent. So I've often gone for Rob Lee and Paul Gascoigne in the centre. Left-hand side has to be David. I'm more of a David Ginola fan than I am a Laurent Robert fan, although there were some fantastic goals for him. On the right-hand side, Nobby Solano had a wonderful time at Newcastle. I was there at his debut in the reserves. 5,500 people turned up to see him play at St James's Park in his reserves debut. Absolutely crazy. Up front, again, it's a tough one. You've got to pick Alan Shearer because of his goal scoring record and his prowess, which means you're then stuck as to who else you put up there. Well, you can only really put one man alongside him because they scored over 50 goals in their partnership that season, and it has to be Les Ferdinand. Peter Beardsley is my all-time favourite player though, and that's often the position I find myself in. You can only pick 11. Beardsley would have to be on my subs bench on that occasion. But you could catch us on another day and I would have Gazza on the bench and I would have Beardsley in the team. It really just depends. The manager would have to be Kevin Keegan because of the wonderful years that he gave us. It's always hard because Bobby Robson obviously was so wonderful. I'm a huge fan of Rafa, not just because I worked for him, but because I know that he got the area just like Kevin Keegan did and just like Sir Bobby Robson did. But Keegan does it because of the cavalier attitude he had, the never say die attitude, and just because of the rant he did on TV more than anything else. Shows the passion. I'd love it if we beat them. Love it. So, that's my team.
No, it's beautiful, mate. That's a great side. That is a great Newcastle side. In terms of the Newcastle chat, we'll leave it there for the moment. What I wanted to touch upon as well was the YouTube journey. We spoke about it earlier on, and as fellow YouTubers, I love listening about the digital journey of other YouTubers because I find it fascinating. Digital platforms are all the rage. They're not going anywhere. If anything, they're going to keep going from strength to strength. You first started YouTube then? Was it at the beginning of lockdown? You said then. Sorry.
It was. Yeah, I mean, from our perspective, we set up the NUFC Matters show 2 years ago, but we didn't do it on YouTube. We basically did it on Facebook, and we actually recorded it on my laptop and we just stuck it out on Facebook. It was a bit of a test. It was a pilot episode, and it was me and Super Mark MacDonald sitting in the office. He would pop over to Newcastle where I've got my office, and we'd just sit there and we'd just talk Newcastle for 45 minutes. We put it out there. We just got people's reaction. People enjoyed it. Obviously production quality wasn't very good. We were just recording it on the laptop, and that was it, just using photo booth. But yeah, I just thought, well, there's something there. Me and Malcolm can talk till the cows come home. 400 people were watching it, and we just thought, well, that's a start. We said, look, let's try it next season. Maybe throw something at it. Ask a couple of our mates if they'd be interested. Spoke to John Gibson from the Evening Chronicle. He said he'd love to do it. Me, John, and Super Mac. And we used my kitchen. We basically just got into my kitchen. They drove to my house. I got a film crew to come, a good pal of mine called Nathan Clark and his mate, and they came and set up. They had all the computer gear to basically plug in into their laptop, and they streamed it on Twitter and Facebook simultaneously, and that was it. We give it a go. We did about 6 months of the program and UFC Matters, and what we found was on YouTube, which we were putting it on YouTube as a down, like just to watch, like a pre-record, probably only averaging about 400 again watching it, but it was we'd give it a go, but with those kind of numbers, it just wasn't going to attract anybody's sponsorship. you know, all we really wanted to do was cover the lads' time, you know, like Malcolm and Gibbo, and although they weren't asking for money because they enjoyed doing it. It was just a case of, well, let's just give it a go, you know, and we wanted to cover at least petrol money, but it wasn't doing that, and it was becoming a bit of a chore, a bit time consuming, and we just thought we'll just give it a miss, you know. We enjoyed doing it. It's there for everybody to watch in the future, you know, and that was it. We gave it in, and you know, obviously last year the pandemic hit, and you know, I found myself basically at a loose end. I'm a promoter, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, and essentially my work and my promotion work, I do professional boxing, I do talking events, that all stopped, and it still hasn't restarted. The acting work came to a grinding halt. No films or TV programs were being made, and essentially all I was left with was writing, which I continued with. I managed to write and produce and publish 6 books last year in the pandemic. But I thought, you know, I'd like to do something else, and what I started doing was doing interviews on Instagram. I went through my little black book. Spoke to Rob Lee, spoke to Rule Fox, spoke to John Beresford, Warren Barton, Nobby Solano, Alan Shearer, you name it. Picked the phone up and said, lads, I'm going to do something on Instagram. It's to help people at home. Mental health suffering, I think, for a lot of people. You know, it'll keep me busy. It's an hour of your time. Let's just do an Instagram chat. So that's what I did. We just did Instagram chats. And I did about 20 of them. And I was averaging about 850 views on Instagram. And I thought, oh, wow, you know, that's a massive improvement to what we're doing with NUFC Matters. You know, it's double the views. And then after that was just live views, and people could interact. I was asking people's questions. So then, you know, eventually Instagram changed. You could load the videos on once you'd hit a certain amount of followers. And suddenly I was doing an hour-long show, and it was loading onto Instagram, and you know, ending up with like 1,500 people watching it, going, "Oh, this is really good." So I made the decision, well, I'll give it a go on YouTube again. So set up the YouTube channel. I had a YouTube channel there anyway, which is under my name, Steve Wraith, and it had crime videos on. Which, you know, some of them had quite a bit of view. That's one of my passions, true crime. I like to watch documentaries. So I wiped all of them off and basically just relaunched it as NUFC Matters on YouTube. And it's grown from strength to strength. I didn't expect it to get the numbers that it has done. But at this current moment in time, I think we're 50 away from 34,000.
That's incredible. Yeah, no, it's great. You should be really proud, mate. It's honestly, people don't realize sometimes the easiest thing to do is to start a YouTube channel. The hardest thing to do is to maintain a YouTube channel. You know, the constant need for content, because you could put something out tomorrow and all of a sudden in 48 hours, there's different news again. And to constantly stay relevant and stay interesting, it's a skill in itself, mate. And you know, you should, like I said, you should be very proud of what you're doing. It really is incredible, the numbers you're producing. With you touching upon boxing promotion very quickly, I just want to double check. Could you arrange Reese to fight Mike Ashley? Is that something that we could do? Is that like for charity after COVID is over? Could we get like some white collar type of sparring event, maybe outside like Sports Direct? Do you think is that possible?
It's how I started, actually, the white collar. I did 7 years as an unlicensed boxing promoter before I went into the pro game. I've been involved in the pro game for 9 years now, so I couldn't arrange it myself, but I know people who could. Reese, if you want to, I certainly could make the phone call. You'd probably have to wear all his gear, though.
Yeah, well, that might be the trophy he wins, and then he'll allow himself to leave then when he's not leaving until he wins a trophy. So I'll throw the fight.
Well, he said, don't forget, he said, I'm not leaving until I win a trophy, or I can find somebody who can take the club to the next level. And he's found that person, so or found those people. So hopefully we won't need to win for him to win a trophy. But yeah, I mean, you know, it's funny how many people have have got different views on Mike Ashley. It's you know, I think we all want him out the club. He wants to go now, so we've just got to give him that time to be able to do it. And Mike Ashley does tend to get what he wants. You know, not many failures on the Mike Ashley I want kind of battles, you know what I mean? And I want never gets doesn't work in his house, I'm afraid. So I think Mike Ashley will get the takeover he wants, and we can all maybe rejoin each other and have cans together once that happens, lads.
Fingers crossed, mate. Yeah. Well, no, Steve, thank you for coming on, mate. Obviously, I know your time is precious, and honestly, I've enjoyed every minute of it. And I can't wait to go watch the documentary that you mentioned. I'm going to go take a look at that tonight now. I'll try and post a link on my Twitter and IG as well, because it's incredibly relevant. And like I said, mate, the work you're doing is fantastic. So keep it up, and God bless, man. I hope it continues the success for you. Reece, was there anything else you want to touch upon before we go?
No, we're all good.
No, and you, lads. Well, listen, you have a great time with this podcast. I don't mind coming on supporting other people's, and that's what it's all about. It's about helping each other in this community. It's not about competition. It's about helping people. And I think if there was more of this, intercommunication between different podcasts, it would make it a lot easier. But look, thanks for having us on, lads. Always happy to come on, and good luck with it. And I'll make sure I promote it at my end. But thanks very much for your time as well, lads.
Your pleasure is all ours, mate. So everybody watching, make sure you like and subscribe. Get in the comments below if you've got any questions. Respectfully, obviously, get in touch with Steve on Twitter, and I'm sure he'll be happy to create some dialogue. But me, Reece, and James Veck will be back next time with another guest, and we'll see you next time, people. Take care. Ciao.